Bardzo serdecznie witam Państwa w gmachu kotłowni na kolejnym wykładzie z cyklu Otwarte wykłady profesorów wizytujących Wydział Architektury. Mam wielką przyjemność dzisiaj przedstawić Państwu pana profesora Wladimíra Šlapetę, który przyjechał do nas z Brna i mamy przyjemność na projektowaniu architektoniczno-urbanistycznym na drugim, trzecim roku z panem profesorem o projektach naszych studentów rozmawiać, dyskutować. Jest to rzeczywiście dla nas świetne wszystkich doświadczenie. Pan profesor jest synem Lubomíra Šlapety, który z kolei jest uczniem Hansa Scharouna. O Hansie Scharounie też już mieliśmy serię wykładów pana profesora. Pan profesor ukończył Wydział Architektury na Politechnice Czeskiej, później praktykował jako architekt w Ostrawie. Był też dziekanem w Pradze, był dziekanem w Brnie, prorektorem praskiej uczelni, ale nade wszystko architektem również piszącym, publikującym znamienite książki o modernizmie, o czeskim funkcjonalizmie, również organizatorem szeregu wystaw, nie tylko w Czechach, ale w Niemczech, w Polsce, w zasadzie w całej Europie, bo również wykładał, wizytował w międzyczasie i Berlin, i Wiedeń. Również możemy się tym pochwalić, że pan profesor w ostatnim roku jest laureatem medalu Bene Merentibus naszego Stowarzyszenia Architektów Polskich. Bardzo jesteśmy dumni. Wykład odbędzie się, panie profesorze, po angielsku. Po angielsku, tak? Może być po naszemu, może być po naszemu. Jak pan profesor sobie życzy. Zapraszam serdecznie. Witamy pana profesora. Brawa, proszę.
Dziękuję. 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 Szanowne Państwa, I switch to English, maybe. I am privileged to be guest of your Polytechnic in Krakow, and I am very pleased to see so many students and also dignitaries of Stowarzyszenie Architektów Polskich. And my topic today is a presentation of this famous period of Czech functionalism between 1918 and 1938. As a first picture, I decided to show you the map of Czechoslovakia, which was a little bit longer as after the war, because the Soviet regime has stolen us one part in the east, like you had this fate with the loss of Lvov and Černovce and Stanislavov, etc. So that way also we are very seriously looking to the east, what is happening there every day and every night. The founder of the republic was Tomáš Masaryk, who loved horses like Marshal Pilsudski, and he was a founder of our state, and he was president till 1935. His foreign minister and later successor in this position was Dr. Beneš. As a symbol of an icon of this time, I selected the famous sanatorium Machnáč in Trenčanské Teplice in Slovakia, designed by Jaromír Krejcar. Trenčanské Teplice is located approximately here nowadays in Slovakia. Well, if we are speaking about architecture of the interwar period, we have to mention, of course, the founder of modern Czech movement, Jan Kotěra, who was trained in Vienna in the school of Otto Wagner, just together with Josef Hoffmann and Jože Plečnik from Ljubljana, and Kotěra got all prizes of the academy, and the most prestigious was the Rome scholarship. So he could spend half of a year in Palazzo Venezia in Rome in 1898. And when he returned back to Prague, he exhibited his sketches in the Gallery Topic in Prague, and it was a success. And it was time when Friedrich Aumann moved from Prague to Vienna, and surprisingly, 27 years old man, Jan Kotěra, became professor of the School of Applied Arts, so the youngest professor in our history. And he moved the whole trends of Czech architecture to the West, and connected us with the development not only in Vienna with the Versacrum journal and Secession, and also with Belgium, with Victor Orta, and with Darmstadt, where was acting his classmate Josef Maria Olbrich from Opava, etc. And he became a real leader of fine arts at the turn of the century. He became director of the journal Volné směry, Free Directions, and chairman of the Manes Artist Club. And in his work, he succeeded to move from Viennese Jugendstil over the influence of cottage houses of the arts and crafts movement from England. And after his trip to United States, he built his masterpiece museum in Hradec Králové, which is regarded as a first building which was influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright, whose work he published earlier, as for instance German journals or Henrik Petrus Berlage in Netherlands. So he was a real founder, and he was professor at the School of Applied Arts, and later, since 1911, professor of the academy, and he educated two generations of Czech architects, the Cubist generation, and after that, the Functionalist one. There is an example of this Cubist architecture. Czechs, of course, looked to Paris in the first decade of 20th century, looked what is doing Picasso and Braque, and they tried to transfer two-dimensional painting in three-dimensional architecture. And it started with a very provocative project of Josef Gočár for the new town hall between the Gothic town hall tower and between cupola of the Baroque church by Dienstnerhofer, and he designed something like pyramid in the main square of the old town. And Pavel Janák, who is here celebrating Silvestre, New Eve, 1911, Pavel Janák, Josef Gočár is here. Pavel Janák has written at the time his manifesto, Prisma and Pyramid, to explain the new wave of architecture away from the rationalist tendency follows function, but with the slogan that important is form, because the form will remain, and this form should be very, very simple cubes, prismas, and pyramids. So the one important influence for Cubist movement was Picasso painting, but there was also a second one, and it was domestic architectural tradition, like, for instance, this Baroque Gothic funeral chapel in Žďár in Moravia, designed by Prague architect Giovanni Santini, whose background was Italy, of course. And he built this fantastic funeral chapel, and some forms really inspired Cubist movement, as you see, for instance, a sketch of Pavel Janák in the upper picture in the right corner. And because of this connection to domestic tradition, Czech architects of Cubist generation have been very successful to build new buildings in historical surrounding, like Josef Gočár, his famous Black Madonna house in the center of Prague, where he really presented Cubist architecture as a Gesamtkunstwerk, as a complex work of art, when he designed everything to the last lamp and last table. And luckily this cafe in the Piano Nobile of Black Madonna was restored during the Velvet Revolution. Now you can drink there coffee in a Cubist ambiente. Another important architect of this generation was Josef Chochol. I have also to mention that there was a third influence for the Cubist movement, and it was new geometry. And also they studied petrographical collection in the National Museum, crystals and stones. And so Josef Chochol developed his very elegant and laconic formal language in his apartment house under Vyšehrad, or in the villa in the same location. The whole movement culminated just before the First World War, when Czechs have been invited, together with Mladá Polska from Krakow, to be present in Austrian pavilion at the Werkbund exposition in Cologne. This is the interior of the Austrian pavilion with presentation of Czech Cubist movement and also Cubist design. It was a great success, but of course the start of the First World War interrupted this promising development, and then Czech architects, maybe also like Polish, French architects, could design 4 years only tombs, gravestones, and memorials for their comrades who have been killed in the First World War. This is one page from the sketchbook of Pavel Janák. And then the war was over, and the same generation of architects tried to develop in the new state new national style. It was like a continuation of Cubist movement, but concerned only on the facade, not like in Germany, where was the main slogan, architecture from inside to outside. It was only architecture for outside, to present the new power, the new state, the new democracy. It is very well illustrated in these two buildings in the Bank of Czechoslovak legions, designed by Gočár with the help of sculptors Otto Gutfreund and Jan Sturza, and in the insurance building Adriatica di Sicurta, designed by Pavel Janák. It was a very short period between 1920 to 1924, but at that time also Czechs, like many architects also in other countries, looked especially to Netherlands, because Netherlands was neutral country during the war, and the whole building production has gone also during the war, like the city Amsterdam South, designed by master plan by Henrik Petrus Berlage, and the buildings done by such known Amsterdam School. And that's the way Czech architects also traveled to Amsterdam. This is quite interesting picture. This is an excursion of Czech architects from Amsterdam to Hilversum by cabriolet bus with Pavel Janák in the middle, and with some later famous Czech architects as students of School of Decorative Arts. And the result of these travels you can see here. This is the enclave complex of villas for artists designed by Pavel Janák. This is a villa for sculptor Bohumil Kafka, and just a block away was a villa for painter Emil Fila, etc. And the influence of Dutch architecture you can see also in this publication by Brno architect Josef Polášek, who spent 3 months on a scholarship to study housing in Holland in the mid of 20s. But very soon the situation changed, and very soon the modern international style started to dominate in Czechoslovakia, especially in 3 groups. The first group was a group of Devětsil, conducted by Karel Tajge, who had also contact with the group Presence and Block, with Třeminsky, Kobro, with Lachert, Šanajca, especially with Šimon Circus and Barbara Circus. They also exhibited in Poznań exposition, etc. But of course, the mainstream was inspired by Le Corbusier when his journal L'Esprit Nouveau appeared in Prague. Then you can see how this still a little bit national style with sausages on the facade little bit changed to more purist expression, especially then in designs by Eugen Linhart and Jaromír Krejcar with the Olympic department store, which was the first modern department store in the center in Prague, which was executed. And you can see here also covers of Czech avant-garde journals, Život, where was first time published Corbusier manifestos in both languages, French and Czech, and then Karel Tajge edited journal Red and journal Pásmo in 20s, which have been leading magazines also for fine arts and for theater, film, etc. This group, Devětsil, was also connected with Germany through Adolf Bene, the leading Berlin theorist, who brought them to take participation in the first international Bauhaus exposition in July and September 1923, and he also published Czech works in this famous book, Der moderne Zweckbau, and Walter Gropius' Almanach International Architecture. So Czech architecture was step by step integrated to international movement. The whole movement was extremely optimistic, also titled Czech Poetism, and this humor and optimism is very well illustrated also in this book by Czech poet Vítězslav Nezval, who has written book Alphabets, and the famous Czech dancer Milcha Majerová danced all alphabets for these poems Vítězslav Nezval. Now it is a rare book which is already represented also in Getty Foundation in Los Angeles, etc. So this was the first group which moved to the functionalism. Then the second group was a group of students of Jan Kotěra, and they had to, at first, to taste national style and cubism, like here, this power plant designed by Bohuslav Fuchs and Josef Štěpánek, 1922. You can see here on the facade on one side, still very heavy battle between this, sausage architecture, These are these remains of fragments of national style. But on the other hand, you can see also this fantastic vault of the main turbine hall, which was obviously inspired by Erich Mendelssohn and his famous Einstein Tower, which was built in Potsdam near Berlin. The second group published journal Stavitel, which is not so famous, but very important because Stavitel presented mostly works of Czech architects. And then the third group have been graduates mostly from Prague Czech Technical University, and they tried to move to functionalism through the development of technology and construction. And main representatives of this group have been Oldřich Tyll, who built the Fair Palace. I'm sorry, which is now a building where is accommodated modern Czech gallery. You should visit this gallery because we have 22 Picassos, for instance, and many other valuable French sculptures and paintings from Impressionism to Fauvet and to Surrealism. And the second important representative of this movement was Ludwig Kissler, who built 3 modern department stores at the second half of 20s on Wenceslav Square. When Corbusier came third time to Prague, and he has seen nearly finished building of the Fair Palace, he was completely shocked, because at that time he built only so small villas in Auteuil or in Boulogne, in the suburbia of Paris. And he used to say, this is a very interesting building, but it is not yet l'architecture, because he criticized that Oldřich Tyll has used normal staircases and not ramps, how he promoted in his projects for Centrosoyuz or for the United Nations Palace in Genève. And he also criticized that in the north facade, architects have used quadratic windows and not strip windows along the whole volume of the building. This group of architects published the journal Stavba, which is the most famous Czech avant-garde architecture journal conducted by Oldřich Starý and by Karel Tajge. And this club of architects have organized also lecture series of famous international architects in Prague and in Brno with Jacobus Oud from Netherlands, who was city architect of Rotterdam. Second speaker was Walter Gropius. The third speaker and fourth speaker have been Corbusier and Ozanfan, and the last speaker was Adolf Loos. My father and my uncle attended this lecture in Brno because every lecture was first day in Prague and second day repeated in Brno, and it had a very strong impact on the whole modern movement in Czechoslovakia, especially Corbusier impressed everybody. I can mention also that it was already second visit of Corbusier. Corbusier visited Prague 3 times. These are sketches of Corbusier from his first visit, 1911, when he has gone from Berlin through Prague, Vienna to Istanbul for his famous travel to Orient. And he made few interesting sketches which again are illustrating his interest on ramps. This is a ramp going to Prague Castle, and an interesting view from the other end of the ramp to the staircase along the Hradčany city just behind the castle. Second visit and third visit we have documented in these 3 pictures. It was the lecture in January 1925 and the last lecture in October 1928, when he was shocked by the Fair Palace. Then he had a conflict with Karel Teige because Corbusier proclaimed that architecture is art and Karel Teige proclaimed that architecture is science. Of course, Corbusier was right. You have not to forget it, but I think you are on the right way with Magdalena and with Bisch and with other professors here. And now we can see the response of Czechs on Le Corbusier. Eugen Linhart traveled for his wedding trip to Paris. He stopped in Stuttgart and has seen Stuttgart-Weissenhof estate, and then he admired Corbusier villas around in Paris. And when he came back, he immediately spent the wedding present of his wife, who was from a wealthy family, to build his own family house in the west end of Prague, which we can regard as the first Corbusian villa in Czechoslovakia. And look, here is already the ramp connecting 2 levels in living room, and also the combination of colors was very similar to Corbusier's scheme of colors in his early white period. When we are looking on that villa and later on these buildings, we have to ask a question. Who was the client of this architecture? Because client is very important in this triangle between the architect, between the client, and between the industry which can produce this villa, which is very important to have in balance. In Germany, the client was Social Democracy, which has allowed to Bruno Taut to build estates in Berlin, Bristolstraße or Zehlendorf, etc., or Hansa Scharouna, Siemensstadt, etc., conducted by city building conservator Martin Wagner in the Weimar Republic, when in Berlin have been built 135,000 of apartments, and which saved the terrible housing crisis in Germany after the First World War. In Netherlands, also social democracy dominated the whole building production. Other situation was in Belgium. For instance, Louis de Koning, who built these elegant villas in Uccle, in suburbia of Brussels, has worked for upper middle class, for intelligentsia and nobility of Brussels. And the similar situation was also in Paris. Corbusier built the Villa Garches for American collectioner Madame Stein, etc., and Villa Savoy for bankiers, so for very wealthy clients. And in Czechoslovakia, the client was a middle class, a young bourgeoisie, which has identified themselves with the new architecture, and of course they wanted to move their view from Vienna to Paris to Berlin and to Amsterdam and also to United States. And the result of it are these big office buildings which have been built by very young architects like Prague Electricity Headquarters, designed by Adolf Bench, and built in late 20s and beginning of 30s, and especially Havlicek and Honzik General Insurance Company. Both architects haven't been yet 30 years old when they won the competition and built this manifesto of Corbusian urban planning on crossroad plan. Now we have problems how to reconstruct this building, but it is another story which would need another lecture. Of course, this middle class was not isolated only in Prague, but spread out through the whole country. These are two buildings designed by Jaroslav Fragner in the city of Kolín, which is 60 kilometers eastwards from Prague on the Elbe River, on the Labe. At first, the electricity power plant, for which he got a nickname Czech Gropius. And in fact, these photographs have been taken by former graduates from Bauhaus in Weimar, Jindřich Koch. And then for the Tatra house, sale house in the same city, where downstairs on pilotis, but glassed pilotis, covered by glassed facade, for the Tatra vehicles, for Tatra cars. And in upper floor was the apartment of the owner. And this whole movement, of course, spread also to the capital of Moravia, to Brno, which had a very special situation because some architects have been trained in Vienna and some architects have been trained in Prague. And this polarity between Vienna, very moderate modernism, and Prague, radical modernism, found very interesting expression, especially in these two buildings. On the left side, crematorium by Ernst Wiesner. Wiesner graduated with Friedrich Ohmann in Vienna. Anyway, Ohmann was born in Lviv, in Galicia. And then he was professor in Prague and then professor in Vienna. And Bohuslav Fuchs graduated with Jan Kotera in Prague. And you can see on the left side very moderate, modern movement with some reminiscence on Cikurata in Persian architecture. And on the right side, Bohuslav Fuchs, of course, is responding Dutch development in the steel movement and also the Unity Temple by Frank Lloyd Wright in Chicago, Oak Park. In Brno was also founded Czech School of Architecture just after 1918, and the first graduate was Josef Kranz, who started by a very promising way when he built Era Café, which is not far from the Tugendhat Villa. So if you will visit one day the Tugendhat Villa by Mies, only, I would say, 456 meters away is the café, which I can recommend you, not only for café, but also for this architecture, because this café was restored and was also published in the first book on intentional style in America by Philip Johnson and Henry Russell Hitchcock in the year 1932. In the mid-20s, Brno received a new radical young professor, Jiří Kroha, who was very interested in social tasks and solution of the housing for existential minimum, but for himself he built quite luxury villa. You can see here in the garden of the villa very difficult life of Czech avant-garde during the crisis, you know. The poet Vítězslav Nezval is inside of the swimming pool with the Russian emigre Roman Jakobson, who was later professor at Harvard, and Karel Tajge is sitting in the back, and they are all tasting Czech Slivovic. So it was this difficult life of the leftist avant-garde, but later Jiří Kroha became protagonist of socialist realism, which you can also admire in Nova Huta, nearby of the center of Krakow. Not by Kroha, but Polish similar cases. But the most successful architect in Brno was, without doubt, Bohuslav Fuchs. He served as a city architect, and also he had his private office, so he built for the city a lot of public buildings, schools, swimming pools, orphanage, etc. And for private clients, for instance, Avion Hotel, very beautiful building on very narrow side. It's only 8 meters, 35 centimeter broad and 34 meter deep. And he developed inside very beautiful spatial plan, round plan, with the view from the 4th level through the whole body of the house to the entrance. Very interesting solution, and immediately published in the journal Die Form in Berlin, the leading journal of German Werkbund. For the city, he built a lot of schools. The best of them was Vesna School for women professions and dormitory, which I think was the first case when Czech architects inspired somebody abroad. I found in the archive of Giuseppe Terrani one extract of the dormitory by Fuchs, and I think it was inspiration for him for the fantastic raster of his Casa del Fascio, which was built in Como 3 years later. Piotr Gajewski had a chance to visit also inside of this building, which is quite difficult because it's financial office of city of Como, but he succeeded to get in, so ask Piotr Gajewski, he will tell you how impressive is this building. Another pictures of Vesna School, which was broadly published everywhere, and as the biggest manifestation of Czech modernism was regarded Brno International Fair, opened to the 10th anniversary of Czechoslovakia with buildings by Fuchs, by Prague architect Kalous, and Brno architect Bohumír Čermák, who built the exhibition tower, etc. We have always diploma celebrations of the Brno School in the rotunda of the main pavilion. In occasion of the opening of the Brno Fair was also inaugurated the first Czechoslovak Werkbund estate, which is something similar like Little Street in suburbia of Warsaw, in Katowicka Street, where was a double house or triple house by Lachert and Szanajca, where Lachert lived and received me in 70s, so I could visit Lachert house. So similar example was this little estate in Brno with 16 houses, initiated and built by 2 young building developers. They have taken credit of the Brno Bank, but they bankrupted immediately because they could sell only double house by Ernst Wiesner, this one, and they could rent it, the double house designed by students. The other houses have been long time empty. This was the problem. But I can, who was renting this double house by students? It was a scouting club of Brno, because for these kids it was quite exciting to move through this spiral stairway in the middle, and also to have this, as you see in the section, 2 bedrooms, which are, the lower one has only sleeping niche, which is 140 centimeters high. So be careful with such a design. But anyway, it served quite well. So after this economical disaster, Prague Werkbund decided to organize, to build Baba by another way. At first, they organized a competition for young architects for small houses. Interestingly, one prize, the third prize, got Antonín Urban, architect who was trained in Bauhaus, and he designed such known growing house, which was a topic which was also at the time discussed in Berlin in the surrounding of his teacher, Hannes Mayer. Anyway, Antonín Urban has gone with Hannes Mayer to Soviet Union, and he was killed in Lubyanka prison house in Moscow. So it is also connected with our contemporary situation when we can see again this Soviet and Russian aggressive ambitions. But no one awarded entries from this competition was built because these houses have been too small for the middle class in Prague. Because Prague Werkbund decided that they will build a housing estate, but all clients should select architects, members of Czechoslovak Werkbund. So the success, economical success was guaranteed privately by clients. So that's why was built no double house, no triple house, no tenement houses, only solo villas or villas with ateliers. I cannot go to the detail, but I will show you only three best houses of these estates. The first one, all three have been built by Ladislav Žák. The first one for the director of the Museum of Decorative Art and secretary of Czech Werkbund, Karel Herein. It was a building with a round staircase and terrace with a beautiful view on Prague Castle, longitudinal living room and terrace, and 2 bedrooms in upper floor and strip windows. Second house he built for professor of geometry, so quite geometrical composition with the strip windows in the south facade and quite modest facade to the street with bullet window from the staircase. And finally, he built the third house for the lawyer, Dr. Zaorálek, and he regarded this house as a model for one unit for a maison d'habitation like Le Corbusier. This was a result of the trip of Gauchard students. Jacques was one of Gauchard students to the Paris Exposition 1925, where Corbusier exhibited Pavillon l'Esprit Nouveau as a one unit of the maison d'habitation. And it was a great success for young architect Jacques, and he got then commissions to build really luxury villas for top prominent member of Czech cultural society. This is the interior of the house for lawyer Zaorálek at the Baba estate, and you can see the standard, very high, but modest standard of furniture and equipment. And then these three houses which he built for luxury class in Prague. The first one for aircraft designer Dr. Hein, nearby of the military airport. So as you see, Mr. Hein could observe his aeroplane from the top terrace of his house because the runway was only 2 miles away of the villa. And it was practically extended version of the third house of the Baba estate. And then he built villa for the film director Martin Fritsch, who played such a role like Fritz Lang in Defa in Berlin. And for Max Fritsch, he designed exceptional solution because The living room was in upper floor with terrace, and downstairs have been bedrooms, and you can see already how he's moving step by step to streamlined style of the second half of 30s. And yes, so this was the second villa for film director Martin Fritsch, as I already mentioned, and this is the third one for Lida Barova, famous Czech actress, who was so successful that she was invited to DEFA in Berlin, and she made one mistake. She became mistress of Joseph Goebbels, and it ruined her career. It was a house built as a double house. You can have a look that she had a boudoir without kitchen, so he used mama kitchen. It is a mama, because this part was used by her parents. But she has not kitchen, but she has a special belvedere at the top of the house, so she can use the terrace. But as I mentioned, she has gone to Berlin, became a fiancée of Goebbels, and finally Hitler forbidden this relation because Goebbels should be a model family for Germany. But anyway, she then had to emigrate, and she played in Düsseldorf and in Milano after the war. Not a very joyful story for Czech history. But as you see, the Baba had response in many examples of very good middle-class housing through whole Czechoslovakia. This is a house from Ostrava coming architects Oskar and Eli Eller. Eli Eller was a niece of the general director of Witkowice Steelworks. So that way they built always steel skeleton houses, but quite well, like this villa in Prague. And then, on the other hand, to show the whole polarity of the style, influence of Czech industry on architecture, Czech Tatra car, firstly exhibited in Berlin Auto Salon, designed by Hans Ledwinka, and Czech famous train Slovak Blitz Express, which operated between Bratislava and Praha and Ostrava and Praga, designed by Vladimír Greger, who built then in that streamlined style, beautiful villa in Barandov Hill in the south of Prague. Vladimír Greger was then very important part of Czech resistance, and he was executed in Berlin Plötzensee in February 1943. Also, my father and my uncle have been inspired by this movement, especially through their teacher, Hansa Scharouna. This is a villa in Hlučín on the Polish border, and then the villa in Ostrava. The stew in the Villa Miller is taken from this villa. It's a little bit younger, 6 years younger as the Villa Miller in Prague. And this is showing the relation to Hans Scharouna, but sometimes they build also orthogonal houses. But at the same time as the middle class moved to these villas, Karel Teige dreamed to find solution for existential minimum. So he pressed Prague architects to design collective houses following models of Ginsburg, Ladovsky, and Nikolaev from Moscow. These houses, these projects have been presented at the Brussels Congress of SIAM, but the city council has not accepted this design because they wanted to separate families. They wanted to have units only for one or maximum two persons, but two persons shouldn't live together longer as 3 years, and then they have to change. And children should be taken in special dormitories to teach them probably Marxism and Leninism. So it was not acceptable for a democratic state. So nothing of that was built, and cities of Prague and Brno have built normal social housing with small flats to 40 square meters. I mentioned Prague and Brno as centers of Czech modernism, but there was the third one in Zlín, in the headquarters of the Baťa shoe industry. Baťa developed from a small village with 2,500 inhabitants in Zlín in 40 years, a city which had nearly 50,000 inhabitants, and the whole city was built in unified systems with brick cubes as houses, and then main public buildings and industrial buildings have been built in such known Baťa module. It was 6.15 meters, 20 feet from American, because Jan Baťa brought this system from America. So in that system was built the hotel, which original name was Společenský dům, then renamed Hotel Moskva, now immediately in February this year renamed Společenský dům again, a little bit too late. And Vladimír Karfík, who was practicing in the Corbusier office short time and long time in Frank Lloyd Wright office in America, he designed also Baťa headquarters, which is quite interesting because of the office of the boss, which is located in the elevator. So Mr. Baťa could stop in every floor and control if his collaborators are reading newspapers or if they are really working for the family. Jan Baťa, the successor of Tomáš Baťa, invited Corbusier to Zlín, and in that time Corbusier designed also new master plan of Zlín, with, of course, he wanted to present and to build his unité d'habitation. You see these groups of unité d'habitation, which was not acceptable for Baťa, because Baťa used to say, we have to work together, but we have to live separately in small garden cities in family houses. On the right side is a design for Baťa pavilion in Paris, which was also not built. And next picture, you can see on the right side, Corbusier design for Baťa standard department stores for Paris, not accepted, but shortly after that, Baťa built his department store in Amsterdam on Kalverstraat in very similar way, but without Corbusier. So you can see what is plagiatorism in architecture, which is going through centuries. As you have seen in this presentation, there have been many connections also with Polish architects. And here you can see some examples. Vladimír Karfík working in a no-smoking office in Arizona, in Taliesin West. My father and my uncle admiring Empire State Building. And my father last time in Berlin in September 1936. And next picture will be interesting for you, because here you can see Madame Helena Circus and Šimon Circus in Brno and Zlín during the Siam East Congress in May 1937. The Siam East countries met 3 times, first time in Brno, second time in Budapest, and third time in Greek islands in May 1938, and then was the end because of tragic political events. I have to mention that this international relations brought also interesting entries by foreign architects and buildings designed by foreign architects. Like you can see here, for instance, competition for Brno Hotel between Oud and Behrens. Below Behrens competition for Prague, Skonto Bank, and on the right side, Bachner department store, which was built in Ostrava as the last building before Mendelssohn left the country. Also, Dutch architects have been present in Czechoslovakia. Mat Stam built one villa at the Baba estate, and also Johannes Dijker has taken part in competition for sanatorium on the Elbe River in northern Bohemia. And there are also interesting villas built in Czechoslovakia by German architects like Villa Strauss in Liberec by Thilo Schoder, who was right hand of Henry van der Velde in Weimar, and then freelance architect in Gera. And Heinrich Lauterbach from Wrocław built two villas in Jablonec, one for Czech client and one for German surgeon, Dr. Chmelowski. But the most successful foreign architects who built in Prague was Jože Plečnik from Slovenia, who built a reconstruction of the castle as a residence of President Masaryk, and the Holy Heart Church in Vinohrady. As you see, here is the Masaryk Library. At that time, we had a president who could read books and also write books, and then we had long time analphabets. Maybe in Poland it was similar, and then came Václav Havel, who renewed this library. So now you, in special cases, if Magdalena will come to Prague, I can smuggle her to this library, but it's difficult to take 50 students there. I am sorry. And at the end, I would like to show you the broad repertoire from the point of view of typology in Czechoslovak modern movement this time. These are apartment houses designed by Eugen Rosenberg, who was a student of Gotthard, and later he worked 2 years in Corbusier office in Prague. For instance, he was a draftsman of Corbusier's own apartment in Port Molitor in Paris. And when he came back, he built 6 apartment houses in Prague with a typical plan, as you see in upper picture here, with a central hall, glass to both sides of facades. And then similar apartment house by Richard Podzemny, student of Pavel Janák. Very high standard was reached also in school buildings, like French schools in Prague, designed by Jan Gillar, or hospital buildings, Jan Rosulek, dermatology pavilion. Very interesting was a design for Catholic Church by Josef Štěpánek. It is 1933. Similar concepts Alvar Aalto built at first after the war when he built his Vuokseniska church in eastern Finland and his 3 churches in Wolfsburg in Germany. And very interesting for the center of Prague are the arcades, the passages in the center, like for instance Black Rose arcade nearby of Wenceslav Square with a vault from glassed bricks, very elegant sequence of 3 spaces. Or the Czechoslovak Werkbund arcade with a movable roof. So when sunlight came, the roof could move and sunlight came directly to the courtyard, to the inside courtyard, very beautiful space. Now we are nearly at the end. I would like, contrary to this discussion about housing for existence minimum, to show you 2 examples of houses for existence maximum. The first one is Villa Müller in Prague, where Adolf Loos demonstrated his idea of Raumplan, and where he celebrated his 60th birthday with the client, Mr. Miller and Mrs. Miller. At the time, there was no television, so they had 2 aquariums. I think it was better from ecological point of view, for instance, etc. So it was one fantastic demonstration of a housing for existence maximum. Second one, you will probably recognize, this is a Villa Tugendhat in Brno, designed by Ludwig Mies. Interesting was that the journal Die Form in Berlin organized an enquete and asked some people how you could live in the Villa Tugendhat. And some of leftists have told that it is unacceptable, but Mrs. Tugendhat and Mr. Tugendhat responded separately, but with the same answer. We can live only in the Villa Tugendhat. But they could live there only 8 years and then have to escape to Venezuela, later after the war to Switzerland, where Mr. Tugendhat died already in 1950, and Mrs. Tugendhat initiated a movement for reconstruction of the villa during Prague Spring 1968. And now we are coming to very end, because for you, because you are a Slavic nation, it is not so difficult, but when I am speaking in Germany or in France, it's difficult to remember Czech names, so I have selected only 3, for me, most important architects of this period. All 3 have been students of Jan Kotěra at the Prague Academy. First of them is Bohuslav Fuchs, one of Czech poets titled him Man of Action. When he got a commission, he was able to build it. He built nearly 200 buildings in very high quality, as you see, dormitories like Masaryk dormitory in Brno, or swimming pool in Brno, or villas in Brno, or his beautiful family house with a maisonette like Corbusier, with a picture of Czech cubist painter Emil Fila, and then his work moved in late 30s to a more streamlined and organic architecture when he built this beautiful thermal bath, Green Frog, in Trenčanské Teplice, very, very sensibly located in the old quarry, in this famous Slovak bath facilities. Very good example of the move to organic architecture in the second half of 30s. He became, after the war, professor of Brno School of Architecture. He was expelled by communists 1958, and then he lived in diaspora to his end of the life, 1972. The second one was Jaromír Krejcar. We could say that his nickname was Enfant Terrible, because he was a man who translated Corbusier manifestos from L'Esprit Nouveau and published in Czech language. He was a leader of Prague avant-garde. Finally, when he finished his Machnáč sanatorium, he emigrated at first to Soviet Union with a hope that it will be the better world. He worked 2 years with Moisei Yakovlevich Ginsburg on sanatoriums for Kislovodsk, but it was just the time of the introduction of socialist realism, so he couldn't stand it, so he emigrated back to Czechoslovakia, and immediately he won competition for the Czechoslovak pavilion in Paris. His wife was Milena, the former fiancée of Franz Kafka. Then he divorced. Maybe he emigrated because of her to Soviet Union. I don't know, probably, because she was femme fatale. and he brought back Riva Radek, and she was a relative with the political commissioner of Lenin, Radek, who was killed by Stalin. So Krejcar came back extremely well informed what is going on in Soviet Union, and then he became big enemy of communism. That's why after he built the pavilion in Paris, maybe you remember also very elegant Polish pavilion designed by Bohdan Pniewski and Stanisław Brukalski in Paris at the same exposition. It was one of highlights of exposition, besides also of Alvar Aalto pavilion for Finland and Sakakura pavilion for Japan. He survived the war, but after the war, he, because of his friendship with Bohuslav Fuchs, he became professor in Brno. But 1948, immediately after coup d'etat, he emigrated to England. He was teaching at the Architectural Association and died in London. In Czechoslovakia was published no obituary. And the third one, the last one, was Kamil Roškot, also student of Jan Kotěra, whom we can demonstrate as a Plato, as a philosopher of Czech architecture. He was not interested in minimal houses. He was interested in great tasks, in cultural buildings, and in big urban tasks. He won several competitions for urban planning in Prague, and he built very beautiful small theater, which was luckily used in our poster by Martin. Then he built also tombs of Czech kings in the crypt of the cathedral, very small but beautiful space, with Charles IV in the middle of the space and other Czech kings around, and 4 queens in one sarcophag. I think it is not possible in England, but it was possible in 30s in Czechoslovakia. And he built also Czechoslovak pavilions in Milano, in Chicago, and finally, like a gravestone of the whole republic, he built Czechoslovak pavilion at the World Exposition in New York, 1939, opened after total destruction, disappearing of Czechoslovakia from the map. So the pavilion was built, but not mentioned in official catalog of the exposition. Quite beautiful, elegant building with a monumental expression, even when it is without any decoration. And interesting is also the quotation on the facade. After the tempest of Rus has passed, the role of the country will return to see our Czech people, which used Masaryk in his inauguration speech when he was elected president. Then Kamil Roškot used it on the facade in the moment when Republic has disappeared from the map. And third time, this quotation was used by Václav Havel in his inaugural speech after the final collapse of communism. So it was very lucky time for my generation when the change came, like Poland with Solidarność. But nowadays, you see, we have to face another problem. So we have not to liquidate our attention. Dziękuję bardzo.
No, I don't believe it. Any questions? Jakieś pytania mogą być po polsku. Pan profesor świetnie po polsku mówi. Panie profesorze, coś? Bardzo dziękujemy, panie profesorze. Czekamy już na wykład, który się odbędzie w piątek. Zapraszamy Państwa również bardzo serdecznie. Dziękuję bardzo. W piątek pan profesor będzie mówił o rodzinnych sukcesach. O architekturze, ale też o szlapetach. Także zapraszamy serdecznie. 12:00? 12:00. Samo południe tutaj. W piątek się widzimy. Dziękuję bardzo. Dziękuję bardzo.